Topic 9, Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics is more on macroeconomic aspect, right? And of course, usually people will compare Keynesian economics with neoclassic economics because Keynes, the one who we base the name based for this Keynesian economics, actually claim that classic school of thought, right, where free market, right, price mechanism did not work 100% well. So he gave his own thought, and therefore we have this so-called Keynesian economics. But as usual, some of a general background or introduction on this Keynesian economics and the founder called Keynes, right? This school began with the publication of Keynes' The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money in 1963. Later on, you'll see that how he actually had similar and yet different perspective on this employment, interest, and money, right? Especially with classic school. And he remained a major presence in the orthodox economics today. Right? His idea were given an added impetus by the Great Depression. So the Great Depression actually highlight or bring in front of the importance of this Keynesian economic or Keynes idea. Okay? So Keynes adopted macroeconomic approach. Later on, one of the major principles of Keynesian economic is also, you will see that they are more focused on aggregate or macro approach. Right? Then the full name for this Keynes is John Maynard Keynes, was an important figure, right? He's both a chairman of the life insurance company, director of other companies. He's also involved in corporate, right? Corporate member of a governing body of the Bank of England. He's also one of the important person that part of the regulatory. In addition, being a financier, he also a high government officer and then author of many scholarly theoretical work, journalist, and a teacher at the Cambridge University. So nowadays, we also always see this notion of industrial academia and governance collaboration are strongly encouraged industry and the government and the academic. So you see this person, one person already has involvement in a corporate industry and the governing body and government officer, government side, and he's also a scholar, theoretical work, journalist, and teacher. In this case, is the academic side. So he has all three in one background. Okay? Now, the major tenet of the Keynesian school, the major principle of the Keynesian school. Right? So one by one, macroeconomic emphasis, concerned with the determinant of total aggregate amount of consumption, saving, income, and output and employment. As compared to the microeconomic, they may focus on marginal aspect, marginal gain, marginal product, marginal labor, marginal cost. Right? Second principle, demand-oriented. Keynesian school more on demand-oriented. Even classic school may be also demand-oriented, but neoclassic school will say that it will be both demand and supply-oriented. Right? Okay, for Keynesian school, this principle stress the importance of effective demand, now called aggregate expenditure, as you have just studied in your macro one, as an immediate determinant of national income, output, employment. Aggregate expenditure consists of sum of consumption, investment, government, and net export spending. Right? In your macro one, if you use the most basic AE model, right? So AE equal to C consumption, I investment, and G government expenditure. Of course, you want to expand into international trade. You should have net export spending, export plus import, or export minus import. Okay? So your AE model, aggregate expenditure, AE, consists of C plus I plus G, and net export is actually from the Keynesian school perspective. Instability in the economy, from this Keynesian school of thought, reoccurring boom and bust because of the level of planned investment is erratic. I mean, the planned investment is up, down, very fast and a lot. Investment spending is determined jointly by the rate of interest and the marginal efficiency of capital. Okay. Mostly people will only think that it's determined by the rate of interest, right? As in your macro also, right? You say that investment is determined by interest. So if you have a negative relationship, therefore the investment curve is actually sloping down, right? So higher interest rate is associated with higher rate of borrowing. So you discourage investment, so investment will decrease, right? But for Keynes, beside rate of interest or interest rate, the marginal efficiency of capital is also one of the determinant. This later means the marginal efficiency of capital depend on the expectation of future profit and the supply price of capital. These two are the one that cause a lot of fluctuation. Expectation of future profit and supply price of capital. So mean expectation can change anytime and can change erratically, right? Of course, include the supply price of capital. Right? The expected rate of the profit from a new investment is unstable, right? Of course, even to invest a multi-million, let's say factory machine, then for a period of maybe you expected this machine has a lifespan of 30 years, right, or 40 years or 50 years. So you have to expect what actually going to happen in 40 or 50 years. Do you still want to build a whole factory and buy a machine and then to produce, for example, a rubber glove, right? Or for example, face mask. Do you want to still? You think that now pandemic face mask is very highly demand. So will you invest a machine? If let's say this machine are extremely expensive, assume that it's extremely expensive, right? And they will last you for 40 or 50 years. Then it's a fixed cost, right? Will you want to buy? So you have expected what happened to the demand of face mask in 20 years time, 2 years time, 50 years time. So this expectation is unstable, right? One of the more very important aspect on the principle is wage and price rigidity, right? Of course, this wage and price, actually wage is actually the price of labor lah. Wage and price are rigidity. Some textbook may only write price rigidity because wage is also price for labor. Which tend to be inflexible downward due to individual factor. For example, company can easily increase the wages of his worker, is most welcome, but when they want to decrease the wages of the worker, they will have protest, they will have a labor union, they will sue the company, they will say the employment contract, whatever. So there's a lot of institutional factor that try to prevent cut wages, right? Cut salary. Firm respond to lower sales by reducing production and laying off worker, not by insisting on a wage cut. So therefore, usually they will lay off worker at VSS or those by contract or by part-time, they will reduce. Right? Of course, nowadays, laying off worker is also inflexible, right? Because they have they are contractual, right? They will pay. Prices are sticky downward. Decline in the effective demand initially caused reduction in the output and employment, but not the price level. And deflation occur only under condition of extreme severe depression. Nowadays also you see every people also say economics no good, so everything no good, then pandemic, but you notice the price actually didn't go down that much, even though during the pandemic, right? Or in 1997, 98 Asian financial crisis also, even though we are in crisis, many of the countries, especially in Southeast Asia, officially recession, but the price or the inflation or deflation did not really occur. The price remain stable or some even increase, right? So it's sticky downward. Right? Something like this. That's what you say in the practical, when the price go up, right? Then they hardly go down. They go up very fast, but then they go down very slow. This one actually fit well if you use empirical research, fit well on this so-called threshold model or not threshold model, is non-linear empirical modeling. You have the non-linear ARDL model, right? Why they use non-linear? Because they divided two type of behavior of the pricing in two different ways. One is either positive, that means increase and decrease, right? That's why you sometimes also heard that the price increase like a rocket, but decrease like a feather. That means it's not a straight line, right? The slope of the increase may be steeper, the slope of the decrease may be lower, like increase like a rocket, but decrease is little bit, and then very slow. You see the feather go coming down is very slow. So sticky price problem. So when the price is sticky, that means the market cannot function efficiently, automatically as in the classic school, because the classic school say that, oh, when you have an excess of supply of goods, the supply more than demand, the price will go down. When the price go down, quantity supplied will reduce, quantity demanded will increase. So therefore, and this process will be automatic and fast and continuously until the supply equal to demand again. But the problem is the price cannot reduce, or at least will not reduce that much until you get the equilibrium, or you may not reduce as fast as it is claimed. Right? So this is one of the major criticism on the classic school of thought on the automatically price mechanism do not work well. That's why you have a continuous depression, right? Or economic recession. Therefore, you need an active fiscal and monetary policy. Right? Many people claim that Keynesian school of thought is only fiscal, not monetary. Keynesian school of thought also do propose monetary policy, but at the same time, they also criticize that or claim that monetary policy has a lot of restriction, not as flexible or efficient as fiscal policy. Right? So to overcome this one, government should intervene actively through appropriate fiscal and monetary policy to promote full employment, price stability, and economic growth. To combat recession or depression, we cannot depend on the pricing alone. We can, right? The price mechanism and free market, according to a Keynesian school, is not efficient because of sticky price. So to combat the recession and depression, government should either increase its spending or reduce its tax. The latter increasing private consumption spending, right? So it also should increase the money supply to drive down the interest rate in the hope that this will bolster the investment spending. So active fiscal policy and monetary policy is one of the major principles of the Keynesian school of thought. Okay. The theoretical setting of the Keynesian analysis, you will find it quite sound similar because it's also part of your macroeconomic. Keynesian theory is an analysis of a continuous process of production, circulation, and consumption. In aggregate, the value of everything produced in the economy during any period is equal to the total of all income received in that period. Right? If you can see the calculation of GDP, you have actually three methods to calculate, and we assume all methods will give you same answer. Right? In a macroeconomic, you study based on total expenditure. So your total expenditure approach, or you also have this called aggregate expenditure approach, right, which is equal to the output, right, equal to output Y equal to AE, or you calculate you total all the expenditure, then you'll get GDP. Or you total all the income, we call income approach, you also actually give you the GDP. And then you also can calculate the value added approach, or in Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia or Statistic Malaysia, they publish the GDP, right, based on sectoral output, like primary sector, agriculture sector, manufacturing sector, service sector output. Actually, some country publish in terms of value added. So anyway, you calculate is considered the same. Here, the important thing is expenditure and income, right? So everything produced during period is equal to total income received in a period, and the total income is also equal to total expenditure. Because if let's say I buy from you, my expenditure, I pay you money, and it's your income, right? So this process can be shown as a circular flow. See here. Therefore, in order for business to sell all that they have produced, people must spend in aggregate all their income. Then only output equal to expenditure equal to income. But this does not happen automatically, and in fact, is always not happen. Right? Why? Because circular flow has leakages, saving, import, and taxes. Right? And later on, you'll see that how these leakages is counterbalanced by injection. Therefore, beside the AE model, you also have the leakage and injection model, or leakage and injection graph, which actually see saving, import, and taxes element inside. Right? So this also happen because they have saving, import, and taxes. Because of saving, right? All people do not spend all their income because of saving. Right? You have, let's say you have salary 3,000 per month, you will not spend all 3,000 per month. Right? You may spend maybe 2,000 or 2,500. You have saved a bit. So a percentage is saved usually in bank and therefore withdraw from the spending system. So here, of course, you will criticize, or you save in bank, and then this saving in bank can also use as investment. Yes, wait, hold on. So we just start on this hypothesis that not all income are spent, because got saving and because got import. People buy, not spend in this case, not spend domestically to buy domestically produced output lah. So people buy goods and services from foreign business also. So therefore, the percentage of your income is not spent on domestic product, but the money is spent on import and not spent on domestically produced goods. So leakage again. The taxes that people pay are withdrawn from the income expenditure flow. So your disposable income is your your gross income minus the tax, right? Just as you have studied, YD is Y minus T. So the tax is a leakages, right? These three leakages. But these three leakages, there's now saving, import, and tax, may be offset by three spending injection. That's why you have this called leakage and injection model into the income expenditure. And if this leakage and injection are at the same amount, so therefore you also have balance, right? You also equal back. So equilibrium is the total leakage equal to total injection. Okay. Import can be offset by export. Government use taxes to finance the purchase of goods and services. So even though taxes are taking out from your spending, I mean, it's taking out of the economic circular flow, but can be put back inside the economic circular flow through government use of this tax to finance purchase of goods and services. If it uses all tax for this purpose and balanced budget, which is also being encouraged in the classic school for balanced budget, right? Then government expenditure will exactly offset the tax in the spending system. Third, if businessmen wish to expand their capital, they can finance the investment in capital goods by borrowing funds that have been saved. So the saving in the bank are taken out from the consumption, but being re-borrowed or re-lent to businessmen to spend as investment. Right? So investment then may exactly offset the saving leakage. And of course, if you study institutional economics, or later on you want to do a final year project, you also this third sentences will be very important, because businessmen wish to borrow money at the fund and then save and then to investment and then exactly offset the leakages. So, but therefore in this case, there is a need for a efficient financial market. So financial market development may be part of your variable to determine the economic growth or the economic stability, right? So because if your S saving equal to I, is Y saving equal to I is mostly because of the some theory claim that because of the financial market. If you don't have bank, you don't have any financial market, right? You don't have bank, you don't have stock market, you don't have debt market, bond market. So how can you equate S with I? Okay. So first you have three leakages, and these three leakages can be offset by three injection, which import offset by export, saving offset by businessmen borrow for investment, tax offset by government pumping in money to finance purchase of goods. Right? If the three injection into the income expenditure flow are just as large as the three leakages, that means if they are the same, then spending equal to the value of production. So you get back equilibrium. assuming that demand and supply are equal in each industry, then everything that have be produced can be sold and the prosperity regained. Next, in the new classic economic, wage are paid according to the value. This is another thing, right? So wage are paid according to the value of marginal product. So value of marginal product is declining. This one you will study in micro 2. Right? You study that equilibrium wages is equal to the marginal the economic value of the marginal product of labor, right? So marginal product labor in this case is also the value of their marginal product, the value of the labor marginal product, right? So value of marginal product or marginal product of labor is declining, right? You have a sloping down. Thus, to enable high number of workers, which must decline. So as in your micro 2 study also, you see that if you are to hire more labor, right, you have to decline the wages because the subsequent more and more labor, right, you're going to take in, you are assuming that they have a lower productivity, which is reflect in their lower value of their marginal product or lower marginal product of labor. So let's say, for example, you hire the first 10, you give you very high product, they give you 100 output per hour. Then you hire until the number 1,000 will give you only 10 marginal product output. So the marginal value of product is declining. So therefore, you want to hire more and more labor. So you have to give lower and lower wages. So that demand for labor stock is declining, right? Then the neoclassical economy define this worker. Okay. So wages must decline if you want to hire more number of workers. In this case, let's say some worker, let's say 50 out 125, decline to take the wage cut. Right? So this 50 don't want to take the wage cut. So what happened? Do you consider this 50 as unemployed? Based on neoclassic economy, they are not considered as unemployed because they voluntarily do not want to take this pay cut. Then you voluntarily do not want to work. So you are considered as voluntarily unemployed and not considered as unemployed. So therefore, full employment still exists. Right? I mean, 125 people, 50 don't want to take the wage cut, they are unemployed, but they are not considered as unemployed person. They are just taken out, right? So still full employed. So these three injections into the income expenditure flow would normally equal to the three linkages, right? If you base on this classic school assumption, why? Because neoclassic theory show that the free play of supply and demand would balance international transaction, sound fiscal policy, right? In this case, means government will spend and balance budget, tax equal to the government expenditure. The rate of interest would always bring saving and investment into equality. Later on, you'll notice that the rate of interest for Keynesian are not really related to saving investment, but they are more related to the demand for money and the supply for money. The last point represents a crucial difference between neoclassic economy and Keynesian. So industry will automatically equate demand of fund with the supply of fund in free market. Thus, during the Depression, when neoclassic economy were consulted by the government regarding the most efficient way to combat depression, those neoclassic will actually call for cut in wages, right? I mean, during recession, you ask the neoclassic economy what should we do to overcome the unemployment, especially how many people out of a job. They will say that you cut the wages, then output, you have a more demand for labor, so you settle the unemployment, right? So wage cut, right, is their solution. But how about Keynesian? Keynes defend on the marginal productivity theory, right? Recap, the classic or neoclassic school claim that wage is equal to the marginal product of labor, right? And this marginal product of labor is decreasing, right? That means if more and more labor, a higher amount of labor is employed, you expected wages is lower. Why? Because marginal product labor is declining, so you have a like negative slope or sloping downwards, right? On the product of labor. So if less and less and less labor are employed, so you and expected the wage are relatively higher, right? So you see here, Keynes want to agree with the neoclassic and simultaneously disagree with them. So he agreed that wage is equal to marginal product labor. He argued that the real wages could be decreased in either two ways. The real wages. First, real wages is of course the wages divided by the price or take into consideration the inflation, right? Or the overall price level. So first, money wage rate cut would be decreased while the price of the wage could remain constant or decrease more slowly. So real wages can be decreased by straight away decrease the nominal wage, I mean decrease the salary directly, right? And at the same time, the price remain constant, right? Second, the price of which good should be increased while the wage rate remain constant or increase more slowly. I mean the price increase, right? But the wage rate didn't increase. I think mostly reflect on the current or more current situation where your salary will not really increase that much compared to the price of other goods, right? Now here, Keynes depend on this one continue. If the worker employed in 1929, which is the Great Depression, before onset of the Great or the Depression, were receiving value of the marginal product. Okay. If those who employed before the Depression, right, maybe employed in 1929, right, receive marginal value of the marginal product. That means if the in another word, mean the wages are equal to the marginal product labor, right, which is claimed by the classic school, then the sharp decline in employment or the sharp rise in unemployment in the 1930s during the Great Depression with a relatively constant level of physical capital in existence must resulted in a sharp increase in the marginal productivity of labor according to the logic of the marginal productivity theory of distribution. This means what? If wages are paid according to the marginal product of labor, and this marginal product of labor is assumed to be declining, that means more labor, marginal product of labor will be lower, and more labor, the marginal product MPL will be lower and lower and lower as your micro 2, right? Then suddenly rise in unemployment or decline in employment, that means less workers are hired, so the number of labor drop. So in this case, if you still follow the classical hypothesis, the marginal productivity of labor should be very high because now you only employ very few labor. But in so far as the real wages has not increased in the 1930s and many cases have even decreased, it logically follows that marginal productivity theory that employed workers were receiving real wages substantially below their marginal productivity. I mean, if this is the case, in the recession, so many people unemployed, right? Decline in employment or increase in unemployment. So therefore, number of labor drop. So marginal product of the remaining labor should be very high. Therefore, they should be receiving very high wages. So the wages should be increased sharply, right? The real wages also increase sharply, but it's not the case. So if it's not the case, that means this worker has been paid substantially below their marginal productivity. The remaining labor in the workforce are being paid substantially lower, which is not consistent with the theory of classic school where they say it's always equilibrium. The which is paid according to the marginal product of labor. Right? So, therefore, Keynes reject the notion that if capitalist economy started from a situation of full employment, then there is another case. That one is for marginal product labor. He also analyzed on the capitalist depression, right? So he reject the notion of rate of interest would automatically equal saving and investment. So another aspect, not marginal product labor already, now is the interest rate. In classic school, they always equate saving and investment, right? For example, if you have very high interest rate, then you encourage more saving, but investment will be low because of high cost of borrowing. If you have very low interest rate, you encourage investment, but people will not want to save, so you don't have fund to invest. You have interest rate will automatically equal saving and investment, and thus keep aggregate demand equal to aggregate supply. But Keynes claim that his major departure is, firstly, saving was influenced by the rate of interest, right? Agree with the neoclassic, but at the same time, he insisted that the level of aggregate income was a far more important influence on the amount of saving. Or in another word, your saving is not only depend on the interest rate, it's more likely or more importantly depend on your income. If you have less income, then you will not be saving that much, even though the interest rate give you a lot, right? Therefore, in your macroeconomy, you see you have this so-called consumption function. The principle that underlay his departure from the neoclassic of saving was referred by Keynes as a consumption function. What is inside a consumption function? You have big capital C equals to autonomous consumption plus A plus BY. So your B will be your marginal propensity to consume. Your Y is your income. So in your consumption function, as you study in your macro, C equals to A plus BY. So the Y is the aggregate income. Therefore, saving not only influenced by the rate of interest, but is much more impactful will be the aggregate income. Define your consumption function, you have the C equals to BY, not C equals to BI interest rate. Okay? So consumption and saving were primarily a function of the level of income, right? Beside the autonomous consumption, the rest you have to see the income. So the relationship between the income and the saving is a marginal propensity to save, or the income and the consumption is a marginal propensity to consume, right? And if you assume income can be used on two items only, that means either you consume or you save, right? Then therefore, the marginal propensity to consume is equal to the marginal propensity to save. But here the important thing is, or his major departure is the role of income on saving, right? As compared to the role of interest rate on saving as claimed by the neoclassic. Second, he argued that saving and investment did not determine the rate of interest, right? The interest was a price that equalized the demand and supply of money, which is quite different, even though it's also a bit related. I mean, even though it's not unrelated to investment and saving. Right? So, at any given time, the supply of money was constant at a level determined by the action of the central bank or monetary authority. That's why in your macro, you'll see the money supply curve is always vertical, one straight line from top to bottom, right? Because it's assumed to be determined by the central bank. The demand for money, which was the same as a liquidity reference, was according to Keynes determined by three motifs, right? Just as you already just studied in your macroeconomics 1. The transaction motive, what you want to determine for money transaction motive, the precaution motive, and the speculative motive, right? Only the speculative motive, which is related to the rate of interest. Right? Okay. These two important departures destroy the neoclassic theory of the automaticity of the market. I mean, the market is not automatically can correct itself. The marginal theory of distribution, and that the free and competitive market will result in Pareto efficient. So neoclassic or classic will say that price mechanism, all these things automatically equate the market in an efficient and fast way, but Keynes analysis actually say they are not, right? Because of these few reasons, right? Because wages are not paid according to the marginal volatility of theory, right? Why? As mentioned just now, because of when you have recession, so many labor unemployment, but yet the wages not increase, so show that it's not paid according to the neoclassic theory, right? And interest rate, right, is not the only determinant on the saving rate, right? Interest rate effect is only the determinant of supply and demand of money. Right. Continue the Keynes analysis of the capitalist depression. Okay, you look at the diagram on the right hand side. At the interest rate R1, I mean the higher one, right? There was an excess of saving over investment. You notice based on the stack AB, the B graph, investment and saving. As mentioned just now, if lower and lower and lower and lower the interest rate, you assume that the cost of borrowing to invest is lower and lower and lower. Therefore, you tend to increase or at least encourage the investment. In your quantitative technique, right, you notice return of capital or the net present value, you have to be related inversely or negatively with interest rate. The lower the interest rate will give you higher net present value, or the lower the interest rate will give you higher internal rate of return, right? So therefore, lower internal rate of return, that means, and higher net present value, right, will encourage investment. So in other words, mean lower the interest rate, lower the cost of borrowing, increase investment. But lower the interest rate will discourage saving. Right? If you imagine if your fixed deposit or your bank will give you only 0.0000000000001%, then you will not bother to save that much money. If the bank give you 90% saving, your saving account can earn you 90% interest rate, you'll find all of your remaining cash and put into the bank, right? So higher the interest rate will theoretically increase saving. So you have one stopping down, one stopping up. Then if your interest rate is at R1, saving more than investment. So excess of saving, right? Excess of saving. So what happened? If this situation persists, the aggregate demand would be less than the aggregate supply. So aggregate supply will be less because less investment. Business aggregate demand will be less than aggregate supply. Okay, because investment is a aggregate expenditure, is aggregate supply. So aggregate supply will be less. Aggregate demand will be less. So business will be unable to sell what they have produced because aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. So their inventory of unsold goods were increasing. So as a result, there are large reduction in production, decrease in unemployment, and decline in income. So all this will accumulate and then it become a recession, and later on become a depression, a recession, right? So decline in income, less will be spent on the goods and services in the next period, which is even worse, right? So what should you do if you are in R1? So should you decrease the interest rate? So you could decrease the interest rate. Of course, in this case, you may do it through increase in supply of money, expansion, or what you know as expansionary monetary policy. So when you have original supply of money here, and if you increase the money supply to this line, you can see my mouse cursor this line. So the interest rate, the equilibrium interest rate will drop to this the lower R bar, the R. Then at this lower interest rate, you will equal saving and investment, right? So, and most importantly, also you see that the investment increase, so aggregate demand would increase. Right? Oh, again, but if you add here, you will have this result in reduction in production, decrease in unemployment, decline in income, and when you have decline in income, right, mostly because of decline in employment, there will be less will be spent on the goods, and this will cause another round of problem. Home business again found that even at the lower level of production, they were unable to sell all they had produced. So again, cut back on the production, and a downward spiral continued, right? When they cut back on the production, income fall again, more unemployed. Then in this case, if more unemployed, then the demand again fall even further. So when fall even further, the business found it cannot sell again. Then they will again cut back the production, more unemployment, less income, and again and continue. This one will be continue and continue and continue, right? So investment fell dramatically a while, saving declined more than proportionately, right? This process continued until the decline of income had reduced the saving equal to a reduce of level of investment. So at this low level, income equilibrium was restored, but high unemployment and considerably unused productive capacity exists, right? So if this is given a free roll on a free market, no government intervention, you will have this outcome even though you may go back to equilibrium, but at a low level of income, high unemployment, and a lot of productive capital unused. But the problem is easily solved. This problem can be easily solved. According to Keynes, the monetary authority could increase the supply of money to the point where their prevailing rate of interest are as in figure this one. Right? Extract from this book. So just increase the money supply until I make the interest rate to fall until you equal the saving and investment. Then you need to go through all this spiral downward. Right? But there were some situation in Keynes' view in which monetary policy, increasing or decreasing monetary was sufficient to maintain full employment. But there are some situations that is not sufficient. That means this situation, right, may not be the one and only situation. There may be other situation where the monetary policy, increase in money supply, that may not work well. Right? For example, this one. There are also some situations which monetary policy was not sufficient, which are more realistic characterized by the actual condition of both sustained deflation. Okay. The first one, the distribution of income was so unequal. That's why income equality, right, is one of the main topic, one of the main goals of the sustainable development goal, all these things, and also one of the main policy agenda of every country. Right? If the income is so unequal, increasing saving by putting more income into the hand of the wealthy who save much more than the worker did. So you increase the saving also no use because the wealthy will save more, right? Inject income. The full employment level of the output and the income was so high that regardless of how low the interest rate sank, the saving and investment would not equal. So if you imagine this one, the interest rate drop from this R1 to R, you can equal the saving and investment. But if this is the case, the interest rate drop until zero, the investment and savings still not equal. Maybe perhaps drop until negative level, then only the investment and saving equal at the negative level. So, but theoretically, you may not be able to drop the interest rate into negative, or practically. But of course, in practical or theoretically, you can still put a negative interest rate, right? Or at least a negative real interest rate, right? But at least from this perspective or from this figure 15.4 is different from this figure 15.3, where the efficiency or the sufficiency of monetary policy or especially monetary policy is completely different. Right? And then the second situation, if the rate of interest that would equate the full employment level of saving and the investment was very low, the monetary policy may not be able to lower interest rates sufficiently. Here you will notice a similar concept that you can study. If monetary authority pushed the rate of interest so low that nearly everyone expected the interest rate to rise significantly in the future, then people would prefer to hold cash rather than the securities, even when the monetary authority dramatically increased the amount of money in the market system. This situation actually happened before, during, and just after the post-pandemic, right? So before the pandemic, also you notice the economy is quite weak, a lot of crisis, right? Starting from the Greece crisis, all these things, right? Then the government, the monetary policy respond by increasing money supply or decreasing the interest rate until to some point when the United States, the interest rate is 0 to 0.25 percentage point, right? Malaysia also now interest rates are quite low, right? But not only reason they push back. So interest rate is so low, you will have this so-called liquidity trap where people would prefer to hold cash also, right? So such situations are depicted in the figure 15.5, right? In either the situation in 15.4, 15.5, the free market or competitive market would lead society into a saturated depression. Monetary policy would be useless or at least not so high, mean at least less useful in preventing the social calamity. Okay, this is the 15.5. If you have a graph like this, right, and until this almost flat demand for money point, you increase the money supply. If you are at the higher end here, you increase the money supply, then the interest rate will drop a lot. Then at the middle part here, you increase the money supply, the interest will also drop a bit. You compare to this one, maybe you increase the money supply, the interest will drop a lot. If you continue to be flatter, then and after this point, the flatter part, you increase the money supply, the interest rate didn't change or change extremely more that it can be ignored. So this part is what we call liquidity trap. So the interest rate will not drop further. And if you have investment and saving like that, even though you do not need a negative interest rate to achieve the saving equal to investment, you need an extremely low interest rate to achieve the saving equal to investment. And the demand for money already reached liquidity trap. So if there is no way that you can reduce the interest rate lower than this R2, so there is no way for you to equate saving and investment. Therefore, there is a constraint on the monetary policy, right? That's why, as I mentioned just now, in Keynesian economics, mostly people are confused or they ignore the monetary aspect, right? They say Keynes only on Keynesian economics only focus on the fiscal policy. No, Keynesian economics also have a fiscal and monetary policy, but only that Keynes lists out there are some other possible situations where monetary policy are less useful or less not sufficient enough or not effective enough to correct the market imbalances and therefore to stop the recession or depression. Okay, so as a comparison, what is the principal cause of a depression based on Keynes, Marx, and Hobson? Okay. So this only may be your tutorial question. Okay. So the answer, the inability of capitalists to find sufficient investment opportunity to offset the increasing level of saving generated by economic growth. Okay? So Marx believed the disease to be incurable. Right? One thing that the capitalists inability of the capitalist to find sufficient investment opportunity to offset the increasing level of saving generated by economic growth will cause depression. And Marx claimed that this one is uncurable, therefore will lead to the fall of capitalism, right? Hobson has prescribed the measure to equalize the division of income and therefore reduce a saving as a cure, but this is likely not workable, right? So if, as mentioned earlier, for economic to become equilibrium or no recession, all the income have to be spent, right? So based on this Hobson, so if not all the income is spent, so there's not sufficient investment. Therefore, what happened? So this Hobson will say that reduce the income, but this one seems don't sound so practical. You cannot imagine that a government asks you don't save, don't save. If you save, I'll put you in jail, right? So it's not so workable or not so practical. Then Keynes' answer to the problem was more realistic, right? Government should step in when the saving exceed investment. So when the saving more than investment, right? Government will borrow the asset saving, then spend the money on a socially useful project. So when I less than S, right, you will increase the I when I smaller S with the plus G. So I plus G will be equal to S. So I and S in this case will be your leakage model. So I plus G equal to S, right, plus T, right? So the government will borrow the asset saving and spend the money on a socially useful project. So it becomes equal to S. That would not increase the economic productivity capacity or decrease the investment opportunity in the future. Here, the important thing is when income small, saving high, bigger, government borrow the asset saving, spend the money on socially useful project, but term and condition apply. This government spending must not increase the government productive capacity. That means the government cannot borrow and spend on, let's say, building another factory or build or set up another government fully owned company, right? Because it will decrease the investment opportunity of the future as well, right? So they just have to spend on socially useful project, and then after that finish just consumption, right? Will not go into investment, right? Therefore, this model may not really fit those countries like Singapore, where the government borrow excessive saving and then they spend on something that are more productive, right? Invest have some investment concept, right? Unlike investment spending, it would not make a full employment level of production more difficult to attain in the next period. So if government spend the money on socially useful project that did not increase the productive capacity, right, or decrease the investment opportunity in the future, so it will not make it will solve the problem. Right? So government spending on construction of school, hospital, park, and other public components may benefit the less wealthy more. So some of the example is they spend on the school, right? School is not investment. Spending on the school, of course, is called in that Romer model, the new endogenous growth model. You'll notice that you construct more school. We assume the literacy rate increased, right? Your education rate increased, and then in this case, it will contribute to a human capital, will also contribute to investment, but at least it's not directly contribute to increase the capacity or increase the investment. So government construct school, hospital, park, just build more park, right, for public convenience. Right? New to the wealthy had the political power, they would probably insist on policy that would not redistribute income away from them. But the problem is, even though government spend on this school project, park, right, other things that may benefit the less wealthy, the political power will actually try to ask the government to spend it on something that may benefit themselves, knowing the wealthy, instead of benefit the less wealthy. Okay, sometimes this term called lobbying in US or in the developed country. You even have a company that are specifically business on lobbying the government, the lobbyists, right? Who has it might be political necessity to channel this spending into the hand of the large corporation. You know, little that was benefit to the society will be accomplished directly, and this would be better than nothing. So here you see that when investment less than saving, government Keynesian economy will say government step in plus G, but this plus G have to be careful, not on productive capacity and not that can decrease the investment opportunity in the future. So the best would be to build school, hospital, park, other public conveniences, right? And may be benefit wealthy. But at the same time, because the government, this G is quite a huge amount, a business, right? So the businessman or the wealthy, the more powerful one will try to grab a share of this government spending for themselves, right? So they will be asked them to do some or project or whatever proceed so that it will not distributed from them to like tax them a lot and then build a hospital, build a school that mostly benefit the poor. So, but at the end, even though the government rechannel the G, right, back to a large corporation, which is the wealthy and the powerful, is better than nothing. So it will be better than nothing, right? Later on, you'll notice that one of the example here will be to channel to military expenditure, right? Military expenditure will not benefit the less wealthy because it's produced by large corporation. You and I don't know how to produce rocket, right? So it's produced by large corporation, and this government expenditure, if they spend on military expenditure, is fulfill all the condition here, but yet the benefit is not to the wealthy, but the benefit is more to the large corporation. So, but still better than nothing. Right? How about the efficiency of Keynesian policy? From 1936 to 1940, economists hotly debated the merit of Keynesian theory. During the war year, under the stimulus or enormous government expenditure, stimulus or fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policy is a is part of the Keynesian school of thought. Most capitalist economy will rapidly transform from situation of severe unemployment to an acute shortage of labor. So you see, during this period, because of they adopt the Keynesian policy, which call for a expansionary fiscal policy or stimulus government expenditure. In the crisis also, you can see many government in many countries also can stimulus package 1, government increase the expenditure 1, and stimulus package 2, then another further government expenditure package, further increase the government budget. So all these are expansionary fiscal policy, part of a Keynesian school of thought, right? The situation will transfer from highly unemployment to not enough labor, from too much labor unemployed and then become lot shortage of labor. So indirectly mean very efficient. Right? Most economists believe that this wartime experience prove Keynes' idea. This prove that Keynesian school of thought is workable, right? Much better than a classic school, which call for reduced wages only, right? But the optimism of Keynesian economy after the war was proven to be less than completely justified. So earlier is okay, very good, but later on it become less. Many recession occur since World War II despite less severity in terms of length and environment. So even though you say Keynesian economics are so good to prevent recession, can easily solve it, right? Okay. But after World War II, you also see that recession coming in and out, but less but less severe. Right? So Keynesian policy had worked. Is in this case, do you think that it's worked tolerably well? Right? When one look at the surface of the gross national product and employment statistic, one can see that Keynesian policy mitigated from one form of capitalist crisis only to bring on 2 new forms of crisis. So, is Keynesian, what Keynesian advanced actually mitigate the crisis into another format only. Okay, first, a structural change to a permanent military or welfare economics. More on what we had mentioned just now. Investment, let's saving. Government have to increase the investment part by government spend themselves. So government expenditure, and this government expenditure to be efficient from the Keynesian point of school of thought, right, must not increase the productive capability so that the future investment opportunity will not decrease. So there are some term of condition apply. So they will have to spend on some project that or so-called not really helpful to increase the aggregate supply capacity. For example, you build a park, you build some school, hospital, right? But on the same time, the wealthy or the powerful may want a share or everything or as much as possible to grab this government expenditure. Even though you build a school, they may want to be the contract for build school, but build a school and hospital, you cannot build a hospital in every single road. You cannot build a school on every single road, right? You gotta build a fire engine or police station, 100 police station in one town itself, right? So there's a limit. So there's one way that you can easily spend all the government expenditure and easily fulfill this Keynesian requirement, right, of the G plus G is military expenditure. Right? So a structural change to permanent military and warfare economy. The creation of the precarious debt structure on which the entire economy is based on that create the possibility of economic collapse more pervasively and severe than 1930. And when government spend more, and now this one is more realistic or more practical, where you can see more of this situation happen in developing country, like for example Malaysia, and then you have consecutively how many years, 10 years or 20 years, or some different countries, 10 or 10 years of government expenditure more than tax. I mean, government budget deficit, which have to be financed by borrowing. So you cannot continuously borrow for 20 years, right? So you will create a debt structure, dangerous debt structure that may cause even more severe collapse, right? Right, the Greek economy and now maybe the Sri Lanka economy, right? Okay, so one of the new form of capitalist crisis in this case, a structural change to a permanent military or warfare economy. right? The military economy. Therefore, the military economy, people will link it to Keynesian school of thought. I think it's more glaring now that, or in the future also after the Ukraine and Russia crisis here, many of the European country, they already approved budget for higher military spending, right, everywhere, especially around the European area. But here in between 1947 and mid-1970, the American government spending nearly 2 trillion on military expenditure and remain high thereafter. Two facts clearly emerged from the study of American militarism. First, militarism offers several unique and distinct advantages to capitalists over nearly any other form of government spending. Right? So those who study American militarism, they offer advantage. Right? Second, militarism has become so thoroughly enmeshed in a structure of the American economy that it is increasingly inconceivable that it can ever be expedited short of complete restructuring of the entire American society, economy, and political. I mean, militarism spending in economic society is part and parcel of the American society, economy, and political system. Right? And why sometimes you also see that people either praise or criticize US as the policeman of the world. They want to police everything. They want to send military as so-called peacekeeper and everything, except that the Donald Trump claimed that all these are not beneficial to the US, right? So in order to make the America great again, he even want to withdraw from all this militarism economy, all these unnecessary spending that unnecessary spending to for like so that it will not drain the resources out of American economy. Right? But of course, there are different things. So militarism offers immeasurable advantage to a large corporation. And for large corporation, of course, those militarism industry produce rocket, weapons is not done by a small and medium company. Okay, it's a large corporation. So it stimulates aggregate demand without distributing the income from the rich to the poor. It still stimulates aggregate demand, and of course, the rich actually gain back the government's expenditure through militarism expenditure. There can never be too much elaborated weaponry. Government finance research constantly render military hardware obsolete. So all this hardware you have this, even though in weapon now you see, after some time the weapon become obsolete and then they will have to do again, then investment again. So it will be continuous. Right? Horror story convince most of the public that continued escalation of the arms race is absolutely necessary for survival. Then the capital good industry, the most volatile and unstable segment of the capital economy, is keep operating at near capacity by military production. And yet, this does not increase the productive capacity of the capitalist economy, right? The last one, and yet, this does not increase the productive capacity of the capitalist economy. Of course, you cannot use a rocket system, the HRMS rocket system, the bomb, right? Weapon, gun. You cannot be used to produce others good. So it does not increase the productive capacity. And this fulfill just now, as we mentioned, when I less than saving, investment and saving, government come in, so investment plus government expenditure equal back to the saving, but this government expenditure should not increase the productive capacity of the capitalist. So you just produce gun, weapon, aeroplane, tank, then missile, would not increase the productive capacity. This missile cannot be used to produce table, chair, television. Okay? So the military economy. Okay? Militarism offer immeasurable advantage. Okay, again, continue. Due to virtually all military production is done by giant private corporation, I don't think it can be done by a small company or small or medium company. So done by a giant corporation or subcontract to a smaller private corporation, even though the smaller one is also subcontract, right? Or at least it will not done by one or two individual. It does not compete with private profit making, right? Or contrary, it reduces the anarchy of the free market by giving corporation a stable core demand for not subject to a swing of market. So this military firm will have a constant business. Most evident point to military production being more profitable than production of free market. Of course, by logic, we may not know is true or not. So military business is more profitable than normal business, right? As Luxembourg point out, the theory of what imperialism, large military establishment are necessary to maintain and enlarge the worldwide sphere of influence of capitalist country. You need a big, strong military in terms of army, weapon, right? Increase your influence, in which profitable foreign investment and very variable term of trade can be assured. But if you during the Luxembourg era, they are more on colonization, but now they are more on so-called neo-colonization. That means they don't really take an army and colonize you, but they may threaten that they will do something if you do not follow or give them a favorable term of trade, right? As Veblen point out, this industrial patriotism and militarism are perhaps the most effective means of keeping workers docile, promoting the view among workers that their interests are in harmony with the interests of the capitalists. So this militarism economy provide employment. Right? But the price that we have paid for this militarism, however, is reflected on in the evolution of the military industry complex, in which militarism has become permanent, right? Permanent structure is like through integrated cancer in the very heart of the structure of American industry, right? So you notice, even though US so-called democracy, they have a very large militarism sector in the economy. In 1989 and 1990, there was a good deal of talk about the end of Cold War. So if no Cold War, right, I mean, the world was not so tension. So by right, this militarism economy should shrink to the minimum, right? But yet, there's a powerful built-in resistance to reduction of this military expenditure. How? You see, they will create a new tension, right? Even though Russia, at that time, Soviet Union collapsed. So by right, no Cold War. So immediately expenditure are significantly reduced. US economy face prospect of stagnation and depression. So if there's no Cold War, you think the world will be more and more and more and more and more peaceful from now on. So you do not need to be stand by so much military power. So you can reduce the military expenditure, you can reduce the military economy sector. So if this is the case, then military expenditure decrease. So you will actually cause a problem or decrease in aggregate demand for the US economy. So in this case, it will cause a recession or deflation risk. So it will appear that United States cannot allow this Cold War to cool off. So they must at least create some tension to justify continuous expenditure on continuous military expansion. They will have to justify continuous need for a big military power. They must justify for continuous something like the military expenditure. So they will have to create. They cannot allow it to cool off to a very extent that we are finding some alternative to the danger of communism. So danger of communism, danger of Soviet Union gone. So they have to find something alternative. And of course, in this case, practically you will see that they take China, right? And after the collapse of Soviet Union, they take China and Russia as a continuous threat to the world. So therefore, if there is this continuous threat to the world, or in some aspect also after the 9/11, they will see that Islam, a radical Islam, right, or terrorism in a more general term, if you don't want to relate it to radical Islamic, so they just create something, right, as a danger of communism, to replace this danger of communism, so to justify the continuous military expenditure and to justify the continuous large military economy. Okay. Next and the last one, debt economy. As mentioned, if government expenditure more than the tax, as in the expansionary fiscal policy, when you spend more than you collect, right, the tax, then you have the budget deficit, and to finance the deficit, the government have to do borrowing. When borrowing, especially for continuous, then you incur a debt economy. Right? So Keynes had demonstrated how demand rather than resource could constrain the economic output. If interest could not fall low enough, right, to rectify the situation. As mentioned just now, the two situations where the investment and saving cross at the negative interest rate, or the demand for money actually reach a liquidity trap, so the interest rate could not fall low enough, right? So then other resources of demand would need to be found to fill the gap. Therefore, there is a basis for this so-called Keynesian fiscal policy. Therefore, fiscal policy are considered more dominant or more popular among the Keynesian school of thought rather than the monetary policy, even though monetary policy and fiscal policy are both mentioned by Keynes and the Keynesian school of thought. Expansion of government expenditure financed by borrowing would be more effective than the finance by taxation. Why? You study the multiplier effect, you know that government expenditure multiplier is higher than the tax multiplier, right? In a macro one, right? No, because you have a more direct. So here, right? Yes. Why? Taxation removes some fund that would be spent anyway. Part of the increase in the government expenditure was offset by a decrease in private expenditure. So instead of tax the citizen and then the government spend this taxation, this taxation would have been spent by the citizen anyway. If let's say government didn't tax you, right? You will spend. Let's say government tax you 10 ringgit, but instead of taxing 10 ringgit, they don't tax you. So this 10 ringgit you also spend. So the government tax you and spend. In this case, is what is here. Some fund that would be spent anyway, right? But in anyway, or more easy to see is you see the multiplier effect for the government expenditure is more than the multiplier effect for the tax expenditure, right? For the tax. So debt in Keynesian is not only limited to government debt to finance fiscal policy, but the total debt including business and household. So even though debt are directly, the issue of debt economy is directly linked to the government fiscal policy, not really government fiscal policy, is the government fiscal deficit, or especially fiscal policy with the budget deficit because of our government expenditure more than taxation, right? It's also related to the total debt, then business and household debt is also important. Okay. For example, a slowdown in government debt along with a growing economy after the 1992 did not refute the Keynesian analysis because total debt relative to GDP remain high. So here actually try to say that debt in Keynesian not only because of the government fiscal budget deficit, but also others, because during this time after 1992 to 1998, you notice that the government debt actually dropped, but is compensated or is it balanced back by the increase in household and business and others debt, right? Debt trend in 1998 US economy will represent a change of composition, right? Mostly from other government debt to household debt. Government debt decrease, household debt increase, or household debt decrease, business debt increase, or business debt decrease, household debt increase, right? So it's just a composition. There are adverse effects on relying on the debt to stimulate demand. Keynes called the government deficit during the downturn too necessary at time needed to balance over a long term by running surplus during upturn. So for a healthy economy, right, actually Keynesian school of thought or Keynes also call for government deficit only when necessary. That is, especially when you have a downturn, then investment not enough equal to savings, so you have to increase the government expenditure. So that is only when necessary when during economic downturn. So when you have economic upturn, so when saving is less than the investment, so you have to run government surpluses, right, to balance back the government deficit. Okay. Okay. Ideologically, foundation of Keynesian economy. So neoclassic ideology defense of capitalism has three principal elements. Neoclassic, the free market would automatically adjust to a full employment. Right? So free market will automatically give you full employment, right? Why? Because neoclassic do not assume sticky price and sticky wages lah, right? The marginal volatility theory of distribution as a theory of how distribute income occur, right? But here you notice that in Keynesian, the marginal volatility theorism did not work because in recession, you have very high unemployment, number of workers very low. By right, it should be very high marginal productivity. So by right, their wages should be very high, but no, their wages still remain the same. So in this case, not, right? The invisible hand in a neoclassic school or classic school argued that being a competitive capitalist economy would ultimately attain a Pareto optimum, that means very efficient, right? Keynes want to drop the assumption of automaticity of the market in order to save capitalism from self-destruction, especially the automatically price adjustment, right? He want government to intervene, especially through fiscal policy, because of, again, this sticky price and other things, right? Only to avoid disaster, deflation, and not into capitalist quest for profit. Here, again, as mentioned just now, when government expenditure must not compete with private, right? So government expenditure to intervene is to avoid disaster, avoid recession, avoid deflation, and not into capitalist quest for profit. I mean, government expenditure should not compete with the private, right? Therefore, in some of the European countries, you notice that this government directly own the company in private sector, or so-called government-linked company, or even government fully owned company. And they also do the similar thing, operate in a business as a similar way as a private. So in this case, it do not fulfill the Keynes ideological foundation, because Keynes, the G or government expenditure or fiscal policy or expenditure or intervention in the economy should not, right, into the capitalist quest for profit. That means, in other words, they should not be a competitor to the private business.